So the second story in the education section is actually a chapter I wrote with 2 colleagues. So I'm just going to give you a snippet of those 3 stories. They're all stories about combining poetry and mindfulness to create new creative spaces in higher education. So the first story is my own story, and basically I coordinate a drop-in mindfulness sit for staff in my university once a week at lunchtime. And when I guide the practice, I often guide loving kindness practice because it's close to my heart and one of my favourite practices. And when people are just at the end, towards the end of the practice, I decide to read them a poem because they're in a very receptive mood. And the poem that I read is from one of our great Irish poets, John O'Donoghue, and it's called Fluent. And I think it's very apt for loving kindness and mindfulness. And the poem is, I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. So that's the way I work with poetry and mindfulness. And then I have a second colleague who co-wrote the chapter, Naomi McAreevy, and she teaches English literature and poetry. And the way that she uses poetry and mindfulness together is that she helps her students to mindfully read a poem. So she has a tutorial group at a circle, and she helps them to get in touch with their body and to become more grounded and more relaxed. And then she gets each student to read one line of the poem, moving around. And then she has 2 minutes silence. Then she gets them to read the poem again, and she has 2 minutes silence. And then she asks them to pick one word that they had an emotional or physical response to and share that. Then she asks them to do a longer sharing of something else. And lastly, she puts it in the context of English literature and history. So that's her story. And the very last quick story is my other friend, Larry McNutt, and he works in senior management in higher education in Ireland. And he thinks it's really important in management that each time a management team meet, that they get in touch with their values and how they're putting their values in action. So what he does is he begins every management meeting by reading a poem or somebody else reading a poem that touches in to the basic values important to a management team. And one of the values that he thinks is very important is noticing everybody around the university that is helping staff and students, and being thankful and grateful, and letting them know that you notice them and that you're thankful and grateful for them. So I'll just finish with one verse from that poem. It's a poem about thanks. So I'll just leave it at that. You can read it in the book.